Welcome to the Bolt Brotherhood Podcast. I'm Christian Spears, Air Force Academy class of 2015 and former Air Force football player. This podcast is about brotherhood, leadership, and life after the game, both active duty and beyond. My goal is simple: bring together current and former players to share real stories, lessons learned, and where life has taken us after the academy. What's up, people? Welcome to the Bolt Brotherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Spears, 2015 graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, and I'm excited to bring to you episode 2 of the Bolt Brotherhood Podcast. Today we have a special guest featured here, and so I'm going to give you an introduction of who this gentleman is, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of our content in our episode 2 of the Bolt Brotherhood Podcast. So what I have joining me today is Broam Hart, aka Bro. Broam is a 2015 graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, so a classmate of mine. During his time as a Falcon football player, he played the position of fullback. Broam currently resides in Fort Worth, Texas, which is in the northeastern area of the state, and he's been there for a while. And as far as what Broam does right now is he is the director of business development for SIBRA Advisors, and so we're going to get into some more of those details. I'm really excited to have you on the show, bro. Welcome.
Hey man, C Spears, thank you so much. I'm honored, and kudos to you for setting this up. I think this is going to pay dividends to current, past, and former players. You know, everybody can learn from each other's experiences, so I appreciate this.
Yeah, 100%. This is a special moment for me. I oftentimes, the literal title of the podcast is Bolt Brotherhood, and those of us who are in this community, we know the bonds that we share. And I was almost going to introduce Bro as my brother from another mother, but I could say that about a lot of the Bolt brothers. But Broam is holds a very special place in my heart and in my life. You know, we've been through thick and thin together. In episode 1, I talk about starting my journey in the Air Force in Bravo Squadron at the Air Force Academy Prep School, and Broam was right there. So as we say, day ones. Broam is one of the day ones. So I'm really excited to share your story and to spotlight your story with our audience.
No doubt. Yeah. Peace School, Bravo Squad.
There we go. Got to represent. All right. So what we'll talk about now and what we'll get into is what I refer to as the Bolt Brotherhood life cycle. And so those who have listened to episode 1 will be very familiar with this, but there's going to be some common threads and common themes. And the unique side of it is the specific stories that we spotlight. And so we're fortunate to have Broam here as our first guest. And so we're going to talk about Broam's Bolt Brotherhood life cycle. So we're going to start off with his experience as a cadet and student athlete while he was at the Air Force Academy. He's going to tell us about commissioning as an officer in the United States Air Force and life after graduation. And then we're going to transition to military service and leadership, get more granular details about what Broam did while he was active duty. Then we're going to talk about transition to civilian life. I know that Broam has hung up the uniform, and so he's doing great things on the civilian side of things, so we'll delve into those details. And then finally, we'll talk about identity beyond football, which is a very interesting kind of theme and prompt that I'm really interested to get into those details as far as, what Broam, his identity now, where he is in life, and how that transition has been, after hanging up the cleats. So, Broam, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand it over to you. Let's just start off with your experience as a cadet and student athlete, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, like Christian mentioned, I started off my Air Force Academy career at the prep school. I was in Bravo Squad. Then, as a freshman, went on to Squadron 7 and spent the rest of my 3 years at Squadron 26. I majored in management and also minored in Spanish. And what I could say about the P school experience and the 4 years at the academy was, I think the biggest takeaway is I gained the best friends that I could ever have in my life that I'll consider family, and that's going to be a recurring theme throughout my journey that you'll hear me mention. It's like I have the best of friends, and I'm so grateful for that experience. Now, it was a very tough experience. It was very challenging, but it's a great place to be from. I am so grateful that I graduated from there. And shout out to anybody who goes to the Air Force Academy. Shout out to anybody who graduates from there. So my life as a student athlete, I played all 4 years on varsity. I know you mentioned a little bit about the JV grind. I wish I would have actually went through that to build a little bit more mental toughness. I think I was a little bit of a prima donna, to be honest. I had a big ego. I was coming from high school football in Texas where I was all state my junior year, all state my senior year. I was one of the leading
You
running
were, you
backs
were like that, as they
in the
say. You
state
were
of
like that.
Texas. So I came with a big ego, and,
Yeah.
and that came to my detriment. I will say. Um, I'm very grateful for that experience. I went into the academy football team, and I was actually a backup at the prep school. I think I was third string, but we all got playing time. And then went freshman year, and I actually got to play on varsity as a freshman, which I was very grateful for. But I would like to say that I think that it created a complacent mindset in me. And I didn't realize this until later on in life, where other challenges in the active duty Air Force side started to help me realize, like, hey, I cannot play victim forever. And so, they say 80% of the job is physical and 20% is mental. I feel like I really failed on the mental part, and I wish that I would have taken a little bit more initiative in fixing that at an early age, especially in my college time, because I felt like I had a very average college career, and so I apologize to my teammates for having that weak-minded victim type mentality. It was really all my fault. I mentioned I got to play on varsity as a freshman. I think I got complacent. I didn't keep driving and trying to push myself to get better. I had the physical attributes, I just didn't have the mentality to back it up. And I think that impacted how I showed up on the field.
Yeah.
Um,
Bro, can we talk about that a little bit more?
yeah, let's do it.
So I know we have a lot to cover because you're talking about being on varsity as a freshman. We haven't even gotten to the academic side of things yet, as far as what your experience was as a athlete or as a student and cadet at the Air Force Academy. But please share with us a little bit more about what it meant to you to be on the varsity squad freshman year. Because I know in episode one I talk about when we're coming out of high school, we want to be the man. We want to be on varsity. I don't think of there's many student athletes out there that are making the transition from high school to college who say, I want a red shirt or I want to sit on the bench my first year, my second year. We all want to be the man on day one. And so please share with us a little bit about like, was there excitement when you were on the varsity squad? Was there excitement when you were like getting real live action game snaps? And then you talk about the mentality and maybe how that had implications for your sophomore, junior, and senior year. So let's unpack that some more.
Yeah, no doubt. So you're spot on. Yeah, there was excitement. I'm very grateful for the coaches that gave me the opportunity to play on varsity. Granted, I was playing on special teams the majority of my freshman and sophomore year. I did get to start a couple games my sophomore year, started all my junior year, and then started a few games my senior year and lost my spot to some younger, hungry cats that were really, really true dogs. And so, I think that if I was a little bit more coachable, I was super excited, but I came in with a big ego. If I was a little bit more coachable, if I actually was consistent in the good things that I could do, I felt like I would have had a different sophomore, junior, and senior year, if you will. Granted, there were some flashes of goodness, but it just wasn't to my standard. And I felt like I let my teammates down in that aspect, and I don't blame anybody else but me. So I learned that from whenever I went into active duty. I read this book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willing. And that book taught me a lot about how you should take accountability for the things that you can control. And a lot of the mental aspect of me playing college football, uh, I didn't handle that right. You know, I was calling myself a victim because I got to deal with all the military stuff. I got to deal with academics. You're taking rocket science, astronautical engineering,
Yeah.
aeronautical engineering. I'm a kid from Fort Worth, Texas, like a small town in Fort Worth, Texas. I have no idea what this means. And so, me playing victim in that aspect, I think it really reflected later on in my college career. But I'm very grateful for the experience. I'm talking down on it, but I'm very grateful for the experience. I think it taught me a lot about myself. and there were certainly some flashes of goodness. I would say it wasn't all doom and gloom.
Yeah, 100%. And I hear what you're saying there. Now, as you reflect, I hear the ownership and I hear the accountability of, what was, and not only what was, but lessons you learned and then lessons that now you can apply to life now as the different roles, like your role with Cyber Advisors, which we'll talk about, your role as a family man, right? And how you lead your family. And so I think it's good when like there's lessons that we learn and sometimes lessons we learn the hard way, but it's really something to be said about the application of the lessons that we learn and like how we can apply it, later on in life. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm already teaching my kids about accountability and being coachable and, controlling what you can control. Those are all things that if you learn at a young age, you can make a huge difference in your trajectory. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm glad I learned through those experiences, and I think it's gonna just get better from here on out as a father and as a husband and things like that. I will say the academics part. You mentioned the student part of the student athlete. The academics, I was like a mid-level academic type of guy. I think I graduated with like a 2.96 cumulative GPA. Um, I'm not ashamed to throw that out there because it is
Yeah.
the Air Force
I'm about to say
Academy.
that's better than most. I mean, I have a lot to say about that, but please continue.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not ashamed to throw that out there because again, this is the Air Force Academy. You're learning physics two, calculus two. These are some mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. These are some heavy subjects that I didn't really have a good background in. I remember a physics test. Funny story. I got a 35% on what we call them GRs. What we call
Yeah,
them?
yeah. Graded
GRs.
reviews, exactly.
Great
Yep.
reviews. They call them
Yep.
GRs. See, even at the Air Force Academy, they call things different. It's just different.
Yeah.
So I got a 35% on my physics 2 test, and the next time I took it, I got a 65%. And I remember my teacher walking in with Dunkin' Donuts, and she gave me those donuts and presented me as the most improved student.
Man.
Now, if you're going from 65 or 35 to 65, I mean, that's
Yeah.
just wild to me. To me, that deserves donuts.
Oh
So
man.
I'm very grateful for that experience. The last thing I'll touch on, I guess, in this section is to Coach Calhoun and all the coaches that I had. I thank you so much for the opportunity that you gave me to play football. I got to live my dream. I played 38 games. It wasn't necessarily ended the way that I wanted to, but I'm very grateful that I got the opportunity. Coach Burton, Coach Burton, he recruited you, he recruited me as well. Thank you for the opportunity. I hope you listen to this one day. And yeah, I'm without your help, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So I'm very grateful for you guys.
Very good, man. Giving credit where credit is due. A lot of men came before us and paved the way, and we're standing on their shoulders now, and it's always just paying it forward. That's what this podcast is about. Is paying it forward and giving back to such a rich community, very niche group, in the ecosystem of service academies, the Bolt Brotherhood. So thank you, Brian, for your gratitude that you extend and giving shout outs to those folks who were impactful in your life. So let's transition to commissioning and life after graduation. So, I think it was May 28th, 2015. I remember it like it was yesterday. We walked the stage at Falcon Stadium. We received our diplomas. We commissioned as second lieutenants in the United States Air Force. So, kind of walk me through that experience of graduation, and then, yeah, like when you commission, what'd you go off and do in the U.S. Air Force?
Yeah, no, this is gonna be a fun thing to tell because there's just so much packed into my active duty service time, and I'm sure everybody that you're gonna talk to is gonna have the same thing to say. Right after I graduated, about 3 weeks later, me and my wife Bailey got married, and shout out to Bailey. She just delivered our third baby on 18 April, so I'm very grateful for that,
Congratulations.
and
That's big
glory to
time.
God in that. Yeah, so I'm also grateful to Coach Calhoun. He gave me the opportunity to be a graduate assistant coach at the prep school. And I would say that that's probably one of the best assignments that I had in my active duty time. Not to minimize any of the other stuff I did, but there is something to be said about the impact you can have on kids who are going through the same journey you went through. The lessons that you learned, you can now implant them at a very early stage in their academy career. So I was very grateful to be a coach on the football team for the prep school during that first year of active duty service. and I was also in charge of a squadron of cadets. Cadet candidates is what we call them at the prep school. So not only did I get to impact the football team, but I also got to impact cadet candidates who didn't play sports. I'm very proud of my squadron of CCs. You know, they're off doing big things on active duty now. And if you guys listen to this, I'm very proud of you. I've told a few of them that. So, you know, after that, I went on to be a program manager, which is a 63 Alpha acquisitions officer in the Air Force. I went to Warner Robins, Georgia. So it's close to Macon, about 30 minutes outside of Macon. And this is where I led a multi-million-dollar electronic warfare and software program for the B-1 bomber. So this is the first time I got to deal with money in that level. And it wasn't like I was spending the money. It was more so I was managing it. I was making sure that it was being spent responsibly and that it was being spent on time and that we got what we needed out of it from our contractors. So, you know, that was a very awesome experience. I'm coming into a B-1 bomber, which is a very strategic bomber in our, you know, war arsenal. And that was cool. I got to be in one. I got to, you know, look inside of it. I got to touch and feel the real deal, right? So from there, I stayed at Warner Robins for 3 years. I also worked a special operations project for Air Force Special Operations Command. And so on this project, I was actually developing a new heads-up display and like a new electronic warfare system that operators would use on the ACE and MC-130Js. This is where I learned a lot of hard lessons because I was interacting as a second lieutenant and first lieutenant. I was interacting with lieutenant colonels. So these guys are 15, 16 plus years into their career. I was interacting with these guys who were senior to me, and they were very frustrated with how the program was set up because they were not getting the tech that they needed on time or faster. They want better, faster. So I learned that from the interactions I had with those lieutenant colonels, and it was very impactful for my acquisitions officer career because now I realize the most important thing is putting the warfighter first, putting their requirements first. They're the protectors. They're the ones who are going out doing all the work. I need to make sure that they have what they need. So that drove me to do some really good things. You know, I had a pretty successful acquisitions career because of that. And so after I finished with that AFSOC program, I actually went on to MacDill Air Force Base, and I did a program called Ghost with SOCOM. I was Ghost number 197, and yeah, that stands for how many people have been
Wow.
selected. So I was
So you
number
knew your number. You knew you were the 197th ghost through this program.
right.
Very
So that will
cool.
stick with me for life. That was again, I said this about the football experience, coaching. But this assignment was probably the best on active duty. The reason being is because if you don't know about the Ghost program, it's a very selective program where acquisition officers get a chance to interact and integrate into SOCOM acquisitions. And if you know anything about SOCOM acquisitions, they want to move fast. And so getting things to the warfighter faster so they can do their jobs. And then once you do that, you learn how SOCOM does acquisitions. You get to actually deploy in theater to a war zone or a different location. So I actually got to go to Afghanistan back in 2019, and I had a very, very awesome experience. But before I even got to that point, I got to work with some high caliber people on a $700 million program. And so again, you know, I'm dealing with big dollars again. I'm having to present to the top dogs in SOCOM on the progress of this. This is all teaching me the skills that I need to have a successful Air Force career if I want to go that way, or be successful on the outside. And you know, you mentioned I work for Civic Advisors, so now I work with CEOs that are, you know, they're coming from very tech industry type backgrounds, and I'm having to communicate effectively with them. Everything I learned at that SOCOM Ghost program has definitely helped me in this career as well. So yeah, funny story about Afghanistan. If I'm allowed to tell this,
Yeah, please.
so I was it was so let me back up a little bit. This was a very awesome and a very humbling experience when I was in Afghanistan. Awesome in the sense that I was never going to get closer to the fight than whenever I was in Afghanistan and I was supporting SOCOM. Was I knocking down doors or shooting anything? No, but I was supporting the real deal fight. And that to me was awesome because I got to see the results of my work fast. So the humbling part of it is I got to see how ugly war is, right? So, I am supporting these guys, and oftentimes as acquisitions officers, you're sitting behind a computer dealing with numbers, you're dealing with people, cross-functional teams, engineers, contracting, finance, but you don't get to see what happens on the back end or on the end of that. So whenever you're done developing the product and it's in the warfighter's hands, what does that look like? I got to see that. And so the humbling part of that was, we actually were hit by mortar fire about every other day. So, every other day we're seeing or hearing sirens for mortar fire overhead, and you feel the ground shake. You can hear these things. And there was one day in particular where I was on night shift, and I was with this seasoned Army major who he had been deployed 9 times. This guy was a helicopter pilot, very solid person. And we were walking back from dinner to the office, and as we were walking, this is in the middle of the night, close to New Year's, there's a mortar fire that goes overhead above us, and you can see the trail. I'm looking at it, and we're taught to go into the bunkers.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to look like a punk. I'm standing here with the Army helicopter pilot, so
Yeah.
I'm standing here with him. I'm doing what he does, and we sit there and watch. And the mortar fire, we have some system that shoots them down. It shot it down, and we're just sitting there watching fireworks.
Man.
And once it's all dissipated, I told the Army major, I was like, hey, should we have gotten into that bunker? And he told me, hey, dude, if it's your time to go, it's your time to go. I was like, there's nothing you can do about it. I was like, bro,
Oh
I'm going
man.
home for my babies. I need to get in that bunker next time. So, it's very humbling in that aspect. And, there's plenty more behind that Afghanistan side of the house. There was also a car bomb attack that was pretty substantial. I'll tell you this. I told you it was going to be a recurring theme. I saw people that I graduated with, people that I went to the academy with. I saw them out there at the same time as me. And it was like seeing a piece of home. And so,
Yeah.
we all went through that stuff together. We all experienced similar type of deals. So I'm very excited to see those folks whenever I'm in Afghanistan. And I'm grateful for their service. I'm grateful for anybody who's served in that aspect.
Yeah, 100%. Incredible just stories, man. Again, my heart is over here about to beat out of my chest right now just from the excitement of these are exactly the things that this podcast is for us to spotlight those stories and those things that are yours, that are very unique to you, that you've taken ownership of and that you articulate so well. So thank you so much for that. And even just that last part about other grads that you saw downrange and that you saw in deployed environments. And in this U.S. Air Force community, we refer to that as the long blue line. So it's this long blue line of think about all of the service members who have served from the beginning of the Air Force all the way to 2019 when Broam is having these experiences, even to now as we record this podcast in 2026. That long blue line continues to extend because we have brave women and men who are raising their right hand and taking the oath to defend the Constitution, and doing that through the Air Force, through the Space Force, through the other branches of the armed forces. And so very powerful, very impactful. And so I want to transition to one other thing before we continue into our last couple of themes. But talk to me a little bit about military service and leadership. And I guess I want to get more granular. I want to ask you about what you learned at the academy, which in my mind is very theoretical, versus what you applied on active duty as a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain. Was there any nuance there for you? How did the academy prepare you for that? And I can't help but think about this major helicopter pilot who said, hey, if it's your time, it's your time. And from his experience. But Talk to me a little bit about just being able to transfer that knowledge from the academy, where it applied and where it was helpful, and where you had like that. Oh man, this is like the real world. It doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, so we had those. We had a lot of leadership conferences at the academy. NCLS was one that happens annually, and then we also had really solid teachers that they would give us advice, and they honestly become mentors because they know that you're going to be in their shoes one day. So I remember hearing a theme over and over at the academy, and the theme was look at the things that good leaders do and copy that, and look at the things that bad leaders do and make sure you don't do that.
Yeah.
And that, I would say, carried very well into my active duty time. I got to experience a good amount. I would say the majority of my leaders were great, but I got to see some maybe not so great moments every once in a while. And so there's not one that particularly comes to mind, but what I would say is that that theme and that lesson that I learned at the academy definitely translated into my active duty years. And now I'm able to take what I'm learning as the good things and implement that into my leadership style. So whenever I'm leading a cross-functional team of, I've got a 60-year-old engineer and he doesn't really like talking to people, and I have a finance person who doesn't like talking to this particular person. How am I going to make them work together, and how am I going to get the answers to solve the mission, right? To solve the problem. So I was able to implement the good in the leadership that I saw to make sure that I guided us to a solution as a program manager and team lead, if you will. So I think that's the biggest lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great adage from the academy. Learn from those who do well, and learn from those who don't do well. Just learn what not to do as opposed to what to do. So that's a really good, very very concise way to package that lesson. So yeah, so let's talk about civilian life. So at some point, you decided that your time in service as an active duty officer was coming to an end. And I will just say this: I think this is evident, not evident, but maybe something that a lot of service members can relate to. Transitioning out of the military, separating, no matter the branch. I've always heard that it's a daunting experience. And so tell us about what that was for you. When you decided to hang up the uniform, what it looked like for you to transition out into the civilian world, and also, what do you do now as it's been some years since you've been on the civilian side and you've been building your career on that end, but I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got out in 2021, and there came a time. So I didn't mention this after the Ghost program, but after the Ghost program, me and my wife moved to Los Angeles, and I finished my active duty time out there. I was working some space electronic warfare program out there. Really fun time. But it came to a point where COVID happened, and me and my wife are alone in this 1,000 square foot home in Los Angeles. California is pretty much shut down. Can't even go to the beach. We're cooped up with each other and the kids, and we're like, man, it'd be really great if we had a village around us to help us. And so, we had to make a really hard decision. We made it together. I would say we made it together, and I have no regrets. I'm so glad that I took time to, first off, I prayed about it, and then me and my wife, we discussed it and the pros and cons. Honestly, the pros were a more stable lifestyle to make sure our children could grow up with support that they need when they need it, and that they're not being pulled all around the country every 3-4 years, right? So that was a big decision I had to make, because going to the Ghost program, if you look at people who are ghosts, those are people now that are leading the Air Force or leading the Space Force. And so Ghost really puts you on a good trajectory to have a successful Air Force career, because you come out there with a lot of good skills. And I was leaning on that. I was counting on that as being part of my story. But I like I said, I have no regrets. I got out in 2021. I've been with Cyber Advisors ever since then. It's my first job out of the military, my longest job out of the military, and I hope to do it for as long as I can. So I'm very grateful for that. And also, just one last thing on this transition piece. It can be very scary, but if you have a village like I do. I'm very grateful for it. I'm grateful for my wife's family. I'm grateful for my family, and shout out to them for helping us during that transition period and taking care of the kids and watching them anytime, because that has been such a huge blessing for us. So, like I said, no regrets for me on why we got out. Was it tough? Absolutely. And I'm happy to talk to anybody a little bit more deeper on that in terms of
Yeah.
transitioning.
100%. So, for all of you type A's out there who are taking notes while you listen to this episode, definitely jot that down and underscore it, underline it. Village, right? A village can look like many different things. It could be family, extended family. It could be friends. It could be, a community, a neighborhood that you're in. But for all of the early career, lieutenants out there who are going to hopefully listen to this podcast, and no matter where you are in your career, even our senior leaders need that village, and maybe hopefully by later on, when you're at year 12, year 15, year 18, if you're still active duty, hopefully you've established that by now. But a village is very important. We certainly had a village at the Air Force Academy. I don't know one person, I can't name one person that went from day one, basic training freshman year to day X, graduating and walking across the stage and said they did it all by themselves. If you found that person, let me know. Maybe I need to get them on the podcast. But it takes a village. It really does, in all aspects of life, in your education, on the football team, early in your career, when you're navigating, relationships, when you're navigating parenthood. And so really glad that Bro is able to underscore that for us. And so before we get to our last kind of theme here, Broam, tell us more about Cyber Advisors. What is Cyber Advisors? What do they do? And then what do you do as a director of business development?
Yeah, good question. So, Cyber Advisor stands for Small Business Innovation Research Advisors. And what we do is we help small businesses that want to work with the military. We are liaisons between them and the military. And what we do is we try to use relationships, build relationships, cultivate them to make sure that we are bringing the warfighter requirements to the tech industry and the tech industry to the warfighter requirements. So it's a really fun job because I'm still tied to the mission. And so shout out to my CEO, Sam Reen, who started this company, and he's very passionate about it. I am so grateful that he did, because it's been a game changer for me, and I'm very grateful, and I thank God that Super Advisors exist.
Yeah, very good. And what's been some of your progression? Because you're in a director level position now, and you started, and I think it's also, I love to say count your blessings, but I want to say count your blessings. You started this first role out of active duty, and you've been able to build a career and build some tenure with this employer. And so, what has been the progression for you from like when you first were hired on into like some of your progression through different roles, or what that may have looked like?
Yeah, good question. So I started off as a consultant, basically making sure that my clients were taken care of. I had a good number of clients, making sure that they were connected to the right people in the Air Force, and I tried to get after wins, right? Wins in terms of, are we getting their solution to the right office? And if I would consider that a win. If I have a program office that needs a solution and I've connected them to my company, then that's a win for me. So started off as a consultant, moved up to senior consultant, still doing the same thing, and then moved into the director role probably around year 3 time frame. And I've been a director, and the team has grown. So I started off as a director of a smaller team. Now I'm a director of a bigger team. So more responsibility, making sure that I'm helping my portfolio of consultants with their clients, and providing my advice, right? Making sure that I'm helping my portfolio be as successful as they can be in terms of reaching out to the right people, finding the right things to go after, and things like that. So that's been the progression, if I had to sum it up pretty quick.
Very good. Yeah, sounds like phenomenal things happening at Cyber Advisors. I follow their business page on LinkedIn, and obviously I see some of your posts sometimes on LinkedIn as far as what's happening and the traction that's taking place in that space. And yeah, I think it's very, very commendable to still be tied to the mission in some capacity. even beyond your service. And so that's really, really incredible, really impactful work there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
All right.
it's awesome. Go ahead. Sorry.
Good. So the last thing we'll talk about, one of the last things we'll talk about, because I'm gonna throw a little surprise question at you, a little pop quiz question at the end of it all. But our last theme here is identity beyond football. And I know when I talked about this in episode one, I don't know if I struggled through the question, but even though I jotted the question down and I jotted the theme down, it still caught me off guard because when we think about identity, it's just such a lofty kind of transcendent, aspect. It's not very tangible, and yeah, it's just a very kind of lofty thing for me, a concept for me. So for you, uh, kid from Texas goes to the Air Force Academy to play football, plays all 4 years, do what you need to do to graduate. You commission, you're an officer, right? Commissioned officer in the U.S. Air Force. You're in leadership roles. You've transitioned to the civilian side. I didn't even mention the family side of things, right? You've been married, or you are married and have been married for several years. You have three, beautiful children. And so all these things, right? Identities, you could say football player, you could say service academy graduate, you could say officer, you could say father, you could say husband, you could say director, in your right as an employee with your employer. But I'll pause there and I'll just say, like, I want to give it to you again. How would you describe your identity beyond football and maybe how that's kind of molded into what it is as we're recording this podcast episode right now?
Yeah, awesome question. I had to take some time in reflecting on what I would say on this because you could go so many different ways. Like you said, identity is a huge thing, especially if you come from an athletic background. Your identity since T-ball or since fifth grade, is going to be rooted in sports and being a good teammate and executing, right? But now that I'm away from that, been away from it for a while, I would say my biggest and number one identity definition would be a follower of Christ. First and foremost, I'm not perfect. I will never try to act like I am. I make mistakes, but I definitely have to recognize where all my blessings and good gifts come from. I truly believe personally that all my good gifts come from God. And so, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God and he has blessed me. That's my number one identity foundation, if you will. From there, I'll go husband and father. If anybody on this earth that I want to be fond of me, it's going to be my wife and my kids. I want them to be fond of me for sure. I want them, hope that this doesn't happen for a while, but when I die, I hope that my wife and kids are left with good memories, they're taken care of, and that they know that I love them and I did everything I can to be there for them. So, I have my wife Bailey, my daughter Trinity, son Cruz, and baby boy Zeke. I love them. They're the biggest thing that I'm proud of in this life. So the last one I would say is mission focused leader. I'm in a position of leadership, so I would say that is a huge part of my identity. I like to solve problems, and I said that one time. My wife heard me when I was in a meeting, and she's like, I got a lot of problems you can solve. So I haven't quite solved them all in the home,
Yeah.
but we're working on that.
Yeah.
And I genuinely do like solving problems. So yeah. One last thing before, this doesn't necessarily have to do with identity, but you mentioned village earlier in the podcast. I also would like to recognize the fact that as a student athlete, I needed support, and I got that from sponsor families. There were sponsor families in Colorado Springs, the Gormans, the Nixes. You got John and Chuni Erickson. These people I love so much because they treated me like their own son. So if you're a student athlete or you're just a cadet at the Air Force Academy, highly recommend finding a family that you can be rooted in and that can take care of you. They treated me like their own. and I would not be who I am without them as well. So
Yeah.
that last tidbit I had to throw in there.
Yeah, giving credit where credit is due. I'll mention that. I'll expound a little bit more for any of our audience members who are not from, who didn't go the Air Force Academy route, didn't go the Service Academy route. Sponsor families, I like to describe them as a home away from home. So it's literally families proximal to the Air Force Academy who live, out in the Colorado Springs surrounding area, and they volunteer to sponsor cadets. You could be a cadet, you could be a cadet athlete, but if you're a student at the Air Force Academy, they sponsor you. So it's a place to go wash your clothes on the weekend. It's a place to go out, on a Thursday evening and get, I don't know, Chili's, right? Or something like that. It's a place to go when you want to go catch a movie. And so they really are a home away from home because, we have cadets from certainly all across the U.S. and sometimes, oftentimes we have exchange students as well from international locations. And so those sponsor families are very integral to the United States Air Force Academy community, but also the Colorado Springs community. They just play such a pivotal role, and all those families that Bro mentioned, salt of the earth people. That's how I would describe them. Just salt of the earth people, very good hearts, and just want what's best for the up and coming generation. So really appreciate you, bro, for shouting out the sponsor families that you had. That I was able to benefit from, and then also just the sponsor family program more broadly speaking.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it. I know it didn't really go with the flow, but I had to give credit where credit is due because, man, those weekends where you don't have a car and you're a sophomore and you need to get out, who do you call? You can call the sponsor fam. So, man, so grateful for them.
100%. Love it, man. Love it. All right. So this, I got to give you credit because this whole idea of this question I'm about to ask came from you, actually. Broam and I, we go way back. Like I said, he's a brother from another mother. He's closer. Blood wouldn't make us any closer. I would say that. And so, when I was sharing with him this idea of this podcast, and he's been with me every step of the way, as far as like, I'm sharing ideas. I think I'm going to build it this way. I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And so one of the things Broam said was like, hey, if you could just have like a question at the end of the podcast, that's like, the hook, or like a question that's really just going to like ground the podcast, and make it unique to what this podcast is. So I was working on that a bit, and Broam, you're my guinea pig here. We're going to try this out. You're the first guest on the podcast. And so my question to you is, and you might have mentioned it already, but lessons learned from the academy. So what's a lesson that you learned from the academy, whether it was in a physics 2 class, aeronautical engineering class, whether it was something on the football field, maybe it's out at the practice fields. But what's a lesson that you learned at the Air Force Academy that you still find yourself applying all these years later in life, whether personally, professionally, or both?
Oh, that's an easy one. I thought it was going to be tricky. Attention to detail. How many times do you hear that?
There we go.
It sounds so cliche, but man, attention to detail as a father, attention to detail as a husband, attention to detail as a director of business development, where I'm managing client portfolios, where I'm managing client technology. Attention to detail has been such a recurring theme that is integral to living life in an efficient and effective way, in my opinion. So, active duty, attention to detail, right? It's applied everywhere. So I would say attention to detail is a lesson that is kept me grounded, if you will.
100%. That's phenomenal. All right, that's parting words for our guest, Broam Hart, 2015 grad from the U.S. Air Force Academy. Attention to detail. And so with that concludes episode 2 of the Bolt Brotherhood Podcast. Broam, thank you so much for joining us, and really hope that this episode will reach the masses, because I think there was so much unpacked today, invaluable nuggets and things we talked about, topics we covered that could really just be beneficial to those who will have the opportunity to listen. So thank you again. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back with more episodes soon. So please stay tuned and make sure you tap into the Bolt Brotherhood Podcast.